Hello, everybody. It is your Uncle Fish back again for School Fish Art Stream. J-Man wants Gatling gun on the end of his tail. Oh my goodness. J-Man says the tail's where you put all the heavy artillery. Yeah. Said he used to have a howitzer on the end of his tail. Okay. Something is screwy there.
Oh no.
What is going on with that?
It played okay for me.
Is it not still playing for you? Okay, because it just ended for me.
No, it played just fine.
I am getting a weird delayed thing in my audio all of a sudden.
Oh no.
Are you not hearing it?
No, do you have the stream up on like another tab or something?
Okay. All right, there we go. That's absolutely what I did. I had shared it to my Patreon, so it was playing with a delay, and that was driving me up the wall. I was like, why am I hearing the intro twice out of sync? Wait a minute. Why am I talking like a second out of sync? Okay. Per the usual, things are a little screwy. But anyway, I'm your Uncle Fish. Happy to be back again. This time we are doing Bickering with Beards. We got my buddy T.S. Luther on here, and we are going to talk about all things comics. We're going to let it fly. We're going to talk about all the cool things that are going on. We're going to talk about some of the cool stuff that we've got live like right now, like the at GoMrFish.com. You can check out the Fish Tales Volume 2 anthology, and I just got in the mail yesterday. I got in my Alice and Big Ten acrylic standees that came out super cool. Look, they're bigger than my head. Well, no, not really, but they're like Big Ten's like 6 inches tall, and Alice is like proportional to him. I think she's like 5 1/4 or something. But
That's so cool though.
They're front and back, so like you can get that cake shot if you want it, or you can get the tin can shot from the behind there on Big Ten. That was a lot harder to do than you would think. Like,
No, I know that's difficult. I've done like the character sheets for stuff, so you have like the full
God,
model for people for some artists I've worked with, and they're like, "Can you give me the exact thing, front and back?" And I'm like, "Shit, I don't know if I have the skill for
that
that."
that was a lot harder to draw. Like I drew her back easily. It's so hard to get a version that doesn't have a glare on it. I drew her back easy, and then trying to draw her front and get it to look right was really hard. Like I was drawing every piece backwards going the wrong direction. And then I realized the mistake I was making and had to like delete everything and start over again.
Oh
And
man.
the people that manufactured it, they are on the ball. They are super strict. Like I thought if I do a good thick outline around him, if a little bit of the black showed on the other side from one side to the other, it wouldn't be too big of a deal.
They were like,
Oh
"No."
no, they
They're
were
like,
not
"We don't do
accepting
that.
that.
This needs to look good."
That was not up to their standards. So I
I
had
gotta
to
ask, like, how did
redo
you?
it.
So I saw you and Alex both posting about these really cool standees. You got all this cool merch. How did you land that? Or we can talk about that before we go. Just before
Oh
you
no.
hang up, you need to give me the secrets because you got some cool stuff recently, and I don't feel jealous often about like things. I'm not a super big like I need tchotchkes on my desk guy, but this
Mhm.
was the first time I was like, oh shit, I need that, and I don't like that you have it and I don't have it.
Oh man, and I was asking them like how tight do they fit into the stands, and they fit in really snug.
God, it's so
Like it
cool.
was a little tricky to get them in there. They've got to be in directly straight. And I didn't realize when I was first trying it, there's a real fine plastic film on them that you have to pull off to protect them. So that made it just too thick because it's like super tight connection. So I had to peel that off and stuff. But because they come out so tight, like next time I can have like a platform and then I could make like a portal and have them like jumping out of the portal, or do
Yeah.
one with a platform and rabbits jumping into a portal and just like have the tip of his sword connected in. And like I sent them some sketches and they're like, oh yeah, we can do. And I was like,
Ah, that's so cool,
oh,
man.
oh, I got ideas now. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was relatively simple. Like I had such good results after Braden Boyd pointed me over to Alibaba for the printer that I use there, that I searched over there for acrylic standees and looked around at different price points, and like some of them just from the photos you can tell like, that's not quite the quality that I want. That doesn't
Right.
have the vividness, or doesn't look like it's up to my standards. And I found one that had really good pictures of stuff. They sent me some pictures of some samples that they had done recently, and I decided to try it out. And it wasn't that terribly expensive, particularly each. Like I ordered 25, I think, of each this time around, just to have a little stock on hand, get plenty for the Alice Backer Kit campaign, have some to put on the Fishtails campaign, have some to put on the table, at the next con. And it came out really reasonable. And then, you know, you can sell them for a decent price, and they came out really cool. I saw my friend Sarah had some on their campaign. I was like, ooh, I want. And especially like being able to do them in proportion with each other was really cool. I had similar stances, but the cool thing about Backer Kid is you can do polls and things with the community, which is really neat to get like fan engagement. And so they voted for this one for Alice, and then the leaping Big Ten. So he's leaping from an explosion or out of a portal, and she's standing there looking like a badass. So, maybe
Nice.
next time I'll get one that's him standing or something. But oh man, I want to do Rabbit and everybody, man. That would be really cool. Um, but yeah, it's the hardest part is getting the artwork right, so that they're dead on. But otherwise, it was just a matter of finding them. And everybody out there is pretty reasonable. Like everybody's willing to work with you. The hardest part is just making sure you find somebody that has good communication, which is part of why I like talking with them ahead of time and getting bids and things, just to see how well do they listen to what I'm saying. Is the communication going well? Because for some folks, it's really bad. And it's too hard to do. Or with some folks are like super pushy, or, and stuff. And like, I'm not dealing with that every time we have to make a purchase. No.
It's been such a like weird back and forth for me, like doing any sort of vendor stuff for any comic books, because I'm a dude. I don't like talking to people. I want to be able to click the button and buy the thing. But that's usually not how you get a really good product when it comes to merch for your table. Anything involved in comic books, you want that experience of customizing it, and they want to do it for you. And having to come out of my shell and be like, "Hey, I'm thinking this." They're like, "Yes, for sure, we can do this," or "No, we won't because X, Y, Z." And
Hmm.
having to talk to people has been like nerve wracking, but it has paid off. Like I've gotten so much like better quality stuff. Like you said, like just finding the offset printer and talking to them about the different things we want to do with the books. It's been a wonderful thing. But man, as a dude who just wants to go to the self checkout and not talk to
Oh,
anybody, it's
yeah.
nerve wracking.
I That's why I like the places that have like the online calculators and stuff,
Right.
like Kablam and Comics Wellspring and Print Ninja and stuff. I like, and I'm the type of guy when I'm thinking of a project, I'm thinking in the early stages usually when I'm looking at what printing's going to cost. So I'm like, well, what if I did 20 pages? What if I did 400 pages? What if I did 36 pages? What if I did 44 pages? And what if I did a hardcover? What if I did a soft cover? What if I did a self cover? What if I did a laminated cover? I I hate bugging a salesman that's at work trying to do his job with like, "Hey, could you give me 600 different versions of this price?"
Yeah.
Like, I've been a salesman. That sucks. That's irritating. That's a
That's the
giant
only part of
waste
the
of
job
time.
that like isn't like super easy in my opinion. I did sales for a
Yeah.
long time. I enjoyed talking to people, figuring out what they needed, what they wanted,
Yeah.
but calculating the sales price, I'm like, shit, now I got to do math. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
and you've
know.
got to figure in all these different variables, and then they want it 100 different ways.
Yeah.
And often, that's one thing that I also kind of look for when I'm talking to somebody. That's why I like William, the guy that I'm talking with from Gallant, that I'm doing most of my printing with now. Um, is I can usually just ask him like, where would a good price break be? Like, where does it get
Yeah.
significantly cheaper at what number? Or like, I wanna bring the cost of the paper down. Let's say, like, what's the cheapest we can go to bring the price down on paper without it being total crap? And, like, you can ask him things like that and run the numbers with him, and he can give me good input, like, I know you think you want that, but it's not gonna come out looking good in the end, and I want you to be happy with the product. And so I like I like that, but I absolutely would rather have an online calculator that I could run 6 ways to Sunday and then come to him with my short list of variables of, like, how can we do this best? But,
That's the overthinking part of it. That's the thing that my wife gets frustrated on, like about like we had a flat tire earlier this week and it's under warranty of some sort, right? So I call her going, "Hey, I'll get your tire fixed for you while you're at work. No problem. Take my car. I just need to know the information about the warranty so I can handle it." And she goes, "I don't know." I walk in there, I tell the guy I need a new tire. And I'm like, "Well, you're a really pretty lady and they're going to do that
it
for you."
has its benefits.
Exactly. And they're going to ask me more questions. So I
Yeah.
would just love to do that so I don't stress about it. And she was like, "I don't know what to do. Why does it matter?" And I am one of those people. I'm like, I need the scenario to play well in my head first in the test, and then I'll
Oh,
go do that or make that call.
I have to dry run acting through this thing in my head 10 times before I'm ever walking in that door. I'm like, which side is the desk on? Which side is the lady gonna be? Is it a lady or is it gonna be a dude? Because that's a whole different scenario, man. I have to be prepared going into this. I can't just wing it. Who
God,
knows what's
man.
gonna happen? Things are gonna
It's
go
so
off the
real.
rails.
How many times have you not gone into a new type of restaurant because you're like, I don't know how they give me the food. I don't know what to ask
I don't
for.
know
I
if I'm
don't.
gonna sit myself or am I gonna be seated, and I'm standing there like an idiot in the doorway waiting for somebody to seat me, and everybody's looking at me until
Oh my
finally one
God.
of the waitresses get exasperated and like, "Honey, you can sit down."
You can
And
sit
I'm
there,
like,
like, here,
"Oh
here's some
no, this
food.
is the wrong place," and I just leave because I'm too freaking embarrassed at this point to sit down and eat pizza in this place. I'm gone, man. You made a fool out of me. I'm out.
I don't
Yeah.
try any of those fancy places. They're like, "Oh, we do things a little bit differently, like around here," and I'm like, "Nope, then I'm not doing it. I can't. I need a menu. I need to be able to point at it. I need to be
If
able to
I
just
have
do
to
it."
decipher the secrets of your menu, I don't want anything on your menu. If I have to decode it, if I have to be in the in crowd and know in advance, like I'm no, no, I don't. Like I've been to some that don't have dollar signs on the menu, or they just have like
I'm too broke
just
for that. No, no,
just
thank
have
you.
like a 20 in the bottom corner, not like dot zero zero, just a 20 at the bottom. And
The
I'm like,
20
is that the
cents,
number that I'm ordering or is that the price
right?
or what is this? I don't know. Like, oh, if you need to know, then you're not,
Right. If you
you
have to
can't
ask, you
trust.
can't afford it. And I'm like, exactly. I shouldn't be here.
Yeah. I'm like, I'll just pay
Uh,
for the water and the free breadsticks and I'll be on my way. Thank you. That's too much hassle for me.
So speaking of that, so here's the thing. I've done a lot of these podcasts over the years. I know you have too. I know this is mostly going out to your Patreon people, but if you ever do repost this, we should probably introduce ourselves and say what this is and why we're doing it. Uh,
That's too professional. That's too thought out. That is too on the nose. This I can't walk into a restaurant without having prepared myself emotionally, but I'll go online and just fly by the seat of my pants. But if you want to do it that way, then hello, we will introduce ourselves. I am everybody's ever loving Uncle Fish. I'm Mr. Fish from Mr. Fish Comics. I'm the fastest pen in indie comics. I have worked on 98 books now in the last almost 6 years. In February, it'll be 6 years that I've been working in indie comics. I have done a mess of comic books. I've finished 14 of my own. One of them is live on Kickstarter right now that you can get to at gomrfish.com, and that is Fishtails Volume 2, which is really awesome. It has a story in there illustrated by my son, Barely. It has a story in there illustrated by hand with ink by me and written by my buddy over here. Tell him a little bit about yourself, T.S. Luther.
I am TS and I write comics, and you can find me over at TS Luther on TikTok. And I also have a book going to Kickstarter soon called Hellion and Bash. It's a superhero comic. If you like Invincible, if you like Tokyo Fire, my other comic book, you're going to love Hellion and Bash. What if the world's greatest thief had to pair up with the world's best sidekick, and all the shenanigans that ensue from there? So if you like Thief of Thieves, Invincible, stuff like that, you're going to dig it. And mostly what I do is write stuff for people, and this guy keeps bothering me to write stuff. And I said, hey, I guess I'll do that, but you got to give me some screen time. You got to get me those sweet, sweet Patreon people. I want to talk to them. So he was like, Bickerin Beards, let's do it. Let's argue about some stuff. Let's talk about things that we like, don't like. And I had to talk him out of drawing more things because his hand was going to fall off. So today, what we were going to talk about was, why don't you read mainstream comics, Fish? Like, what's up with that? How come you're not doing it? Is it because you hate Marvel and DC and you don't like fun, or is there something deeper?
I hate Marvel and DC and anybody that waves their flag. I'll burn if you ask me. No, that's not why at all. It's it's actually a big combination of things, really. Like, I came of age in like the late 80s, early 90s and whatnot. Like, I graduated in 93. So like, I was at the little bookstore down the street when this crazy little black and white indie comic came out on newsprint that had these anthropomorphic turtles in it with swords and ninja weapons, and there's explosions and there's a talking ninja rat and there's all this cool stuff. And I was freaking hooked, man. I was done after that. I I already loved all the weird indie stuff, but that just cemented it, man. I fell so deep down the rabbit hole of indie comics with, things that in other places might not seem as independent, but like Judge Dredd and Grendel and Cerebus and all those, the Flaming Carrot, like all those weird things, the Tick, that were out there where people were just doing the weird things they wanted to do and telling their cool stories. And it didn't have to be quite as polished and quite as corporate, and you could just do anything. And I love that. I freaking love Spider-Man. Like, I have more Spider-Man books than anything, probably like neck and neck with Archie, which is kind of odd, but I got a lot of Archie books
No,
too.
I love Archie, man. That's not weird
Oh
at all. I
man.
got an entire album full of old Archie comics.
Spider-Man, Archie, Batman, then the X-Men. Like, I love Marvel, I love DC. I like Marvel a little bit more. I like my characters a little more grounded. I like them to have some struggles. I got so bored as a kid every time Peter Parker had to worry about the bills or something like that, or had to do something grown up that as a kid I couldn't care less about. As an adult, I freaking love all those things. Him pacing across the ceiling, worrying about how he's going to talk to a girl, and is being a hero going to get in the way of his love life, and is he going to be able to pay the bills with Aunt May and all. I identify with that stuff now. It connects with me better now than it used to. But man, indies are just where the weird stuff happens, man. That's where everything cool was going on. That's where real groundbreaking stuff was happening in my mind. And I knew if I got to work at Marvel, like, I could work on Spider-Man, I could do some cool stuff. I'm not likely going to get to do something groundbreaking and earth-changing with him. And if I did do something that created a character like Venom or Deadpool or Cable, that's like, a fundamental groundbreaking, earth-shattering character, it would be owned by them, and they would
Yeah.
decide what got to happen to it. He would get plastered in every book, no matter how ridiculous it was. And that just didn't give me an incentive to want to go there and offer them the coolest stuff I could come up with. Where in indie comics, I can do all kinds of cool stuff, and and I have some say over what happens to those characters. And if I want to kill Virgil off in Green Zone, I could absolutely do that. It might not
Spoiler
be in my best
issue 4.
interest.
Be careful.
Spoiler alert for issue 4 coming out at Christmas on my Patreon. If you want to sign up now for just $10 a month and get comic book shipped straight to your door, Patreon, MrFish.com. But yeah, that was a big part of it, The second part of it was just a financial thing. Like,
Yeah.
I followed Batman pretty regularly. I kept up with the X-Men. I tried to keep up with Spider-Man, but there were so many titles, and I kept up with them sporadically, like up until Batman had the No Man's Land and Gotham got shut off and was being overrun by criminals.
That was
I got
awesome.
a
I love that art.
I got a little bit into that, and then frankly, like, I was just too busy and I couldn't afford it anymore. I
Yeah.
had little kids at the house running around. I was a foster parent, which sometimes we would have like 8 kids in the house for
Yeah.
a while. Like, we had 75 kids come through our house over like 2.5 years. So,
Jesus.
like, I adopted my oldest 2 boys. Like, we got too busy too fast, and I didn't have the extra money to go out, selling 4 or $5 on a book, to keep up with what's going on with Batman when Batman has 6 different titles going on every month. Like, I couldn't do it anymore. And the third reason, which is more important to me a little bit now, is I caught myself, like, anytime I caught a really cool story from Marvel or DC, or a really awesome artist that was doing really cool out of the box stuff I hadn't seen before, I would start thinking of stories that were exactly like the ones that I just read,
Mm.
and my drawings would start to look like this dude that was doing this really cool out of the box stuff that I hadn't seen before, and it was influencing my art too much. Like, we're all influenced by everything that we love, and have little bits here and there of all the different stuff that we like. There's a little bit of Jim Lee still in some of my mouths, and there's a little bit of Mark Silvestri and some beat every once in a while. But I realized I was way too easily influenced by that really cool stuff that I was seeing, the flashy stuff in Marvel and DC, and I I didn't want my ideas and my stories to get, I hate to say polluted, but I didn't want them to be so heavily influenced by the other stuff that I was seeing. I wanted to get my ideas out there and be my cool story. And so I have to be careful now. And now I'm a little bit better about being able to, like, temper how much of that I take in and how much I let it influence in me and how much I study it and how much I'm just like, oh, that's cool, and go on and let it disappear, and not become my focus,
Immediately
like,
become the
oh,
next issue.
I
Yeah.
need to put that panel in my next issue. And I'm a little better about it now, but those are the reasons that I stopped around that time. And then, man, stuff moves so fast and so much has happened. And now, like, if I want to catch up with Spider-Man, there's only 10,000 issues to buy to catch up on what's happening. And, like, all this cool stuff has happened that I missed. And it stinks because I'm out of sync with a lot of stuff. Like, we were talking earlier, like, the Superior Spider-Man run sounds really awesome, and I really wish I had gotten to read that when it came out, but I didn't know it was happening, and it sounds like it would have been a cool place to jump on, but I didn't know it was happening.
And now
So,
it's been a decade and a half since that. Like
yeah.
I'm actually rereading it right now, and I was just talking to a buddy of mine. He goes, "Oh yeah, that's kind of where I fell off." And I'm trying to go, "Yeah, well, you could easily jump back on." I'm like, "Can you easily jump back on?" That was almost 15 years ago that happened. So much like Spider-Man history is there. It's interesting. Like even though I fell off eventually too, same circumstances, having kids, money's a thing. I used to keep up with everything, and now you have to pick and choose and falling off right around there. Actually, it was like at the end of the Superior Spider-Man run, I just couldn't afford to buy comics anymore because I got 2 little ones at home, and they
Mhm.
like to eat food sometimes, and those just
All
felt
the
bad.
time.
All the time
Oh
they're
my
trying to eat and
goodness.
breathe, and that costs a lot of money. You got to keep those lights on, and so I kind of fell off too. And when I did jump back on in comics, especially around when I started making them myself, it was so much easier for me to jump into indie stuff, right? Like jump
Mhm.
into even like the bigger indie, like Image Comics, Boom, Dark Horse, because there were such like smaller runs and contained runs. Like I've read
Mhm.
every issue of Invincible, but there's only 144 issues of Invincible and maybe 1 or 2 tie-in books that you don't have to read. Versus trying to jump into Spider-Man from the last 15 years, and you have hundreds plus tie-ins, plus events, plus other books that are kind of tangentially related, and
Mhm.
it's almost impossible possible. And that's why, like, this big commercial for Marvel Unlimited, when those apps started coming out, DC Universe and Marvel Unlimited, that's when I jumped back in, and that's my homework at night. Like when I'm sitting in bed, instead of thinking about all the ways I've failed in my life, which I still do, but I put them on a little bit in the background. I read hundreds of issues of Spider-Man and Batman, and I catch up on what I missed in the last decade and a half of being a dad and having a
See,
career.
that's my problem because I signed up for those apps too for a
Mhm.
while, especially because of the podcast and like the 5 Star Fridays that we do on Friday nights. Like, I signed up for it specifically for that, just so I could read back issues about characters that we'd be talking about and stuff. But there's always like big gaps of what they have. And
There
they're like,
was. They've gotten so much better. Like for a while, it was like small inches of collection. Now, most of them, like DC and Marvel, I'm sure there's still gaps, but for the most part, it's like the gaps are just in what's come out in the last like 3, 4, 5 months. They have so much of the back catalog now that there's not a ton that you can't pick up and read. Like I've been reading through Spider-Man from the 60s all the way through, and I haven't noticed too much. Maybe
mhm.
there's like a spectacular Spider-Man issue that they got rid of because he did drugs or something. Don't quote me. I don't know if that actually happened. But like I don't notice a ton of gaps anymore. Where before, like I wanted to recommend Spider-Man Reign to a buddy of mine. He had never heard of it. I was like, "Oh, there's an old man Spider-Man comic book. It's really good." I know I'm in the minority about that. A lot of people don't like that book, but I recommended it to him. And before it wasn't on there, you couldn't read it, and now they have all of the graphic novels from Spider-Man you can read through. So it's a much better value proposition now than I think when they launched.
Mm. I I enjoyed what I could read, but, like, I remember one time, and I think it was last year that I had the DC subscription,
Mm.
and we were doing a show on Nightwing, I think, and so I went to go back and look at the Nightwing run, and there was only, like there was only a couple chunks of stuff in there, and most of it was like random older stuff. There
Yeah,
was none of the new stuff from the last few years that everybody was raving about. So I couldn't even glance through that stuff to
right.
know what was going on.
And now you can
Um,
read like all the way through from like when he had the disco suit up to like all the way to the end of New 52 and beyond, like straight through it. And it tells you too, like that's the thing is the apps have come so far. Like when you finish a run, it goes, hey, this is technically the next chronological run, but people liked reading this one afterwards. And it shows you the recommendations. And each app does it a little bit differently, but DC does a really good job of going, hey, this is like the list. This is like
mhm.
what you would read for this event. So these are all
I
the
did like
issues.
that because, like, I was also using it on a client's books because he was going for a real retro feel. So I
Okay.
was looking up the old Doom Patrol issues and stuff, and
Oh, hell
it did a
yeah.
real good job at the end of a book saying, like, okay, this is the next book. But also, like, if you dig this, here's some other stuff that you'll probably like too, or from the same creators or whatever.
Right.
And it was really neat because, like, it's a very specific art style back then, and like the coloring and stuff and the detail that they went into, and I always ended up accidentally sneaking in more detail than I was supposed to, but that's just what I'm used to doing. It's hard to
Well, you
cut
gotta
that
transform
off.
it. You don't want it to look exactly like it did in 1975. It's cool if it kind of looks like if it evokes that, but it's the same thing as like when you see animation where it's like, I kind of want it to look like the old Steamboat Willie. It's like, but you don't want it to look exactly like that because they reused the same piece of animation 4,000 times in that piece. What you want it to do is evoke that emotion. It's like old timey music. You don't put it on, it's not recorded exactly the same way, but you do features of it. They do that a
Hmm.
lot in like chiptune music. Like when you listen to music that sounds like it's from like an old NES game or Super NES, it's not exactly that because they only had so many notes, but it's close to it. It evokes that. When people go, well, this looks, I liked it better when it looked like that, and they'll hand me a book that they're referencing. It's never quite still that exact same thing. I'm like, they had 3 colors back then, guys. Like you
Yeah.
had 12 on this page. It's not the same thing. You just want it to feel the same.
Hmm. And that's what I try and go for. Like, when I do my dot patterns and stuff on things, I've figured out a an easy cheat for it. Where, like, Alex was working on, and Braden uses the like actual dot patterns for
Heck
CMYK and
yeah.
layers them on, and makes it look like the actual old comics did. and I found a quick cheat that gives me a dot pattern over it and adds some color to it and some texture without having to go through all that trouble. And most of the time, when old heads like me are looking at it, it's like, man, you put so much work into this. I was like, no, I didn't. I clicked like 4 buttons and it was done for me. Like I it evokes the feeling that you want. Like there's some light dots across the face and and in the background, and it gives you that feeling without making it as muddy as the actual process can get
Yeah.
sometimes. And so it works out well. I dig my quick cheats to make it look good.
And that's a big part of like creating. Like I've seen so many people go, well, I want to learn how to do it like this because I like this artist and that's how they do it. And I always try to recommend people not do that. It's like learn that way if it helps you do it, if that helps you keep going, but learn the way that works for you because it doesn't you don't have to do it the same way that somebody else did for the end result to be satisfying or for it to even look like that. I see a lot of new guys come up and they're like, I have to do it all practically. I won't touch digital at all. And then when they send me their pages, they're like, I had such a hard time scanning this and it doesn't look like the way that I drew. I'm like, yeah, that's why
I
I
can't find
recommend.
a scanner that will do 11 by 17 anymore. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And I have one and I've had to have people mail me their pages for books. I just worked on this little pencil collective zombie anthology. And these are all fresh dudes like right out of high school. They're like some of them don't even know how to draw yet and they just started doing it to do the book because they wanted to put out a comic book. And I was like, I will help you. And they're like, I don't even know how to get these pages onto the internet. Like they were so confused. I'm like, well, you should have did it digitally. And I love the idea that you want to do it traditionally, but you should always ask yourself, why do I want to do the art this way? Is there a good reason other than you think it's cool? Because sometimes just because it's cool doesn't mean it's the right thing for you at the time. That's
Hmm.
I always say that like that's like a flex that you do later on. Where like I challenged myself and I did this whole thing traditional because I could versus I want to make a book. Sometimes the easiest way is to buy some drawing
Oh
tablet,
man,
use those tools, man.
man, if I had 500 or 1,000 loyal fans that were going to buy my book, and I knew it was going to hit big digits on Crank Stomper, then by George, I would love to do a painted book. I would love to paint every page, paint them at like 2 foot by 3 foot panels, and just really go ham on it. I would love nothing more. That's a goal in my life. I would like to do that for a graphic novel or a trade or something and have a book that I painted because I've always wanted to do it. But it just would take so long that it just doesn't financially make sense for me at the money I'm making on my books. I have to work as fast as I can. And so working digitally and using the digital tools and doing things like we showed off in the newsletter this month where I can use my artwork to make a custom brush with my artwork in it of people in the background to fill in a crowd real quick and make
Yep.
it look really cool and complicated and save myself some time, but it's still my artwork, it still blends in, it still looks good. That kind of stuff saves me enough time and lets me make really epic looking pages with stadiums full of people and still get it out on time, still hit a deadline, not spend, 3 months working on that one page. Nobody's going to pay me enough money to live for 3 months to do one page with a stadium in the background. Like
Right, that
nobody
comes
wants that.
along with like doing it for a long time and having a little bit of that privilege to be able to do it. Like Alex Ross paints every page because he can,
Oh
he's
yeah,
Alex Ross.
absolutely. You
And
can get the money for that.
Exactly. Wildlife had another great comment. So I think there is still a mindset that traditional is somehow more valuable than digital art, even though really it takes the same sort of skills to do it. And that's exactly it. I'm a big student of Scotty Young, one of my favorite artists working today. One of my favorite writers too, just period. Love Scotty Young. And he does a lot of stuff traditionally. Mostly his inks are all coming from his pen. And one of the reasons why he does that is because he can sell the original artwork. So
Yeah.
there is some reality and some truth to the idea of saying it's more valuable. However, when you get to Scotty Young's level and people want to buy your original art, there's more value. When you're
Yeah.
starting out doing it or you're in indie comics, well, some people buy like Fish has a whole tier on Fish Tales Volume 2 over on Kickstarter right now. You can buy some original art from those pages that he drew. Uh So like there is something to it. However, if you're just trying to get a book done and made, and some people won't pay for your original art, it's much better to do it digitally, in my opinion, because you can get it done, you can learn your skills. Man, that's so gorgeous. I wrote the script for that, but look, that is not how I described it. It's so much better than the words I used. I was like, hey, what if there's like a silhouette of a thing? And Fish goes, yeah, I'll make it look good.
Oh, and like I added in this some of this guff between these dudes, and his
Dude, I love that.
expressions are some of my favorite thing in the entire book. And this one little bit, where is oh man, where is it? Where is it? I know I have it in here. There's one little bit where he's griping after Kess knocks him out of the way to go up and sign up to join the
Why I
Crucible
never, no one from my tribe would ever. It's like, no,
ever.
they wouldn't.
And her dad's like, "You're right, they wouldn't, because that's my girl." And like, I loved that part so much. Just the expression on his face, like,
Dude, I love that bit that you add. And that was
oh,
partly like we were talking about one of the reasons why you got so into indie from the early age, because you came up in the 90s where indie was exploding for one of the first times, and you wanted control over that stuff. And I do too. Like, I love making stuff. I love when no one can tell me what to do. But there's a part of why I reach out to all of our indie friends, you, Lucky 33 Comics, Irrepressible, anybody I can write for. Partly it's to build up that resume, but partly because I wanted to practice playing with other people's toys. So if I ever did get the opportunity to work with Marvel or DC, I'd be able to handle it. Because for me as a storyteller, I was always like, no, this is my story. This is what I'm
mhm.
doing. And
I
I
can
ran
do
in
whatever I want in here. But then when you
exactly
have the limitation of this is somebody else's toys that you get to play with, which is honestly like what I've done the most of for the last few years, is
right.
I'm playing with other people's toys, illustrating their books. So I have to stick within
Hell yeah. Thank you, KLR.
what they want for it and what they expect for their character. Thank you so much, Katie. You rock. Um, like, I can't just do whatever with their characters. And
Right.
sometimes, like, I would add something, and he's like, "No, no, 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 no. She's not like an unrequited love for him. Like, you need to change that expression." I'm like,
I remember you
"Dang,"
told me that
because I
story. I love
really
that.
liked that. But
The
you
panel,
know,
I looked it up. We had talked a couple weeks ago. You were talking about like one of your favorite pieces that you ever added to someone's script was this heartbreak on the superhero
mhm,
character's face when he found out that the love wasn't working out. Right, it was like a breakup scene, and you added this, and I was like, you totally were right. You nailed it. It is gorgeous. And then you find out the next issue that he doesn't care at all about
yeah,
this
it's like,
relationship.
no, 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 that's not what I had planned. And it's his book, so he absolutely gets to decide what's going to happen. But I was like, oh man, that was so juicy. I loved that part. I was so proud of that. And sometimes I get to add in random stuff
Right,
that really changes the whole vibe, but that's the fun part of the collaborative process. Like,
right.
he had written one scene in I think the same book, where two of the characters are arguing whether or not they're going to give this, multiversal transport device, this giant cube, basically a TARDIS, whether they're going to give it to the president because he wants to take it because he doesn't trust anybody to have it, they want to lock it away, or are they going to use it to try and get Ultraman home to his homeworld. And they're bickering back and forth like, well, we can't just tell the president no, but it's my only way home. And then Raven, who's essentially the Batman character, walks in and is like, and in the script, he's like, he argues, no, we're gonna do it. We can apologize later if we have to. If there was an interdimensional problem, they would call us to fix it. We're the authorities. And originally I had him very angry. I was like, there's no way they're going to tell us what to do. We're just going to take it. And tough titties. And, but then the more I thought about it, and I'm thinking about like the Batman kind of character and stuff that he is, and I was like, this isn't even really a question to him. Like,
He already
no,
decided this.
no, we're not going to let them do it. Like, it's not even big enough deal to get mad about. So I had him walking through just doing like tech support, checking levels on the computers and stuff. Doesn't even look at them the whole time. And he's just like, no, of course we're going to do it. Like, we're going to take it. We're going to get you home. If they want to complain about it, we'll say sorry later. And just walks off like it's nothing. And like, that is as mundane as that might feel, that's one of the most fun things I've got to put in a comic, just because to me it really shows like it, it shows so much about who that character is. That like, nah, President Schmesident, we're not doing what he says.
And that's one of the beautiful things about having those limitations is coming up with like, well, how do I make this idea that I have fit into that structure? And when it comes to like me getting hired to work with other people, I mean, I've done tons of scripts for you now, and it's a little bit different when I work with you because you're a little bit more open with the ideas and you like my style. So it's like, yeah, we write it together. But I just did a script for Lucky 33 Comics. I don't want to spoil too much. That's their own thing. But I was working on like an old timey radio character. So think like the Shadow or Lone
Hmm.
Ranger type script. And they had some really specific ideas for number one, the rules for their universe, and also what can be done in their books. So I had to really adhere to their style. And back in the day, I think I would have been really frustrated. Like when I first started GMing, like running D&D games, and somebody would make a bad decision or a thing that they wanted to do with their character, I would get frustrated. I'm like, that's so dumb. My story's so much better than that. Why aren't we doing that? And I
Oh
had
my god!
right, and I had to like turn that off because number one, I was wrong. That's not how art
Yeah,
works. My
it's
idea of
it's
good
a
is
collaborative game, and it's not
exactly.
my game
It's
and
not
my
my game.
story.
If it was
Yeah.
my story, I'd be writing a novel right now. I'm playing a game with my
Hmm.
friends, and we are telling a story. And
You're
here's the
playing
thing.
pretend wrong.
Exactly. That was like my attitude going in because I was a writer who started to play D&D, and now I'm a
Hmm.
DM. Now I'm a GM who writes. And it's like this is a team effort. And the thing is their ideas maybe at the time didn't fit with the story I had in mind, but in the end made us like such better story overall because they brought things that I would have never thought of doing because
Hmm.
we're not the same. And trying to fit and play with other people's toys and make my story fit their world, I've become such a better writer, and I think it will get me more gigs as I go because I'm okay with playing with other people's toys. And when they say, no, 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 you can't use Spider-Man in this story, I'm like,
It
okay,
gets you
who can we
so
use
used to
instead?
that collaborative process and
Yes.
that back and forth and that yes and mode that like,
Yeah.
okay, if that's what we're doing, then how do I make it cool and throw it back? And it is fun. And it's fun having those limitations. Like it's one of the things that I still love about Grayscale is having the limitations of only like 5 shades of gray to work with makes you have to get a lot more creative to make things
Right.
pop and make things stand out and draw your attention, and using a limited color palette I enjoy. I started because one of my clients really likes his books to look like they're from the 80s, or the 70s. He wants like that era kind of vibe to his books. So I started by building a custom palette off of the old DC color palette that you see online sometimes, that was all, the handful of colors that they used that came out looking nice on 4 color process. And so I use that as my jumping off point. But I found the more and more I go, the more I really enjoy working with that limited color palette. And I'll jump a little way away from them, but I kind of stay in that zone a lot.
Yeah.
And like when I had the DC universe and stuff, I would go back and study like the Neil Adams Green Arrow, Green Lantern run and stuff and see the amazing things he did with such a limited color palette. And like absolutely up there on Kess, like the yellow highlights and stuff on her, that side light on her. I absolutely stole that from that series, and
Heck
I'm
yeah.
using the same color that he used on like Hal Jordan. I'm using the same freaking trick that I picked up there because I liked it so much. And it's kind of fun playing with those limitations sometimes. Like he likes his books to have flat colors like back in the day. And I'm like, oh, but I could do highlights and shadows and airbrush and all this cool stuff. I've gotten to where I do pretty much flat colors all the time now because I really like what I can do with it. And I like the dramatic look of it. Like I can do the cool airbrush stuff and it's fun, but I also like the way this look
Hey,
comes out.
J-Man.
Hey, J-Man, look at you in the house, probably getting in trouble at work. If J-Man's boss is watching, just count this up as continuing education. That's what it is. He's studying up to be better at his job.
Yeah, this will
Give
get
the
you your
man a
license
raise.
renewed right now.
Yeah. Katie says, I'm a writer, but I find that D&D ruins my storytelling because dice hate me. She notoriously has really, they really yeah, it doesn't work with her. She does her and Dice. They're not on speaking terms.
Sometimes
It's
that's the fun for me as a writer, is because if I come up with a story, I usually am pretty loose with like my bullet points for a session. But like a bullet point, here are the things that are going to happen no matter what the players do, and here are the things that can happen from the dice rolls, and then I have the stuff in between. But when the dice do something that I'm not expecting, when somebody rolls a 1 instead of a
so
20,
much fun.
it's so much fun
Oh
because that's
my
a thing that I could not have predicted. I didn't make it up in my head. It's a surprise to me who wrote the story. And that's
yeah.
where like I get so into it because I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like when the characters, when they overcome something, like I worked like 2 days on coming up with this big bad guy, and they hit a nat 20 and they kill him in one hit. And I'm like, well, I got to come up with some stuff right now because I didn't see that coming, you know? My rogue
My
has failed
rogue.
every single stealth check, and now he has plus 11 to stealth. Your failures
Natural
really do color
one.
that level up, right? It really does help you figure out. You're like, I know what I'm putting my points into this round.
I like you were saying earlier, the like when they take a left turn or something like that, it derails like what I had planned for my story. Like in high school, I would have like the bad guy figured out and his henchmen and what monsters they were going to come up against and the base and all this stuff. And half the time it was a superhero game, but still same vibe.
Right.
And they would always go off the rails. They would always, I would have like one really cool way to beat him, and it was going to be epic when they figured out the puzzle and they figured out that you had to hit him from the back of the neck for it to work. And then they would come up with something completely off the wall, and I'm like, well, damn. Yeah, I mean, that would work. So, okay. And eventually, I just quit coming up with cool ways to beat the bad guy. And I was like, you figure it out.
Right.
And then eventually, it evolved, especially with my kids, because my kids are notorious for taking a game off the rails and going. I mean, they don't take a right or a left. They will freaking spin in circles till they puke and then just take off running. And so it always goes crazy. And so eventually I quit coming up with anything. Like sometimes I would go into a game with a vague idea of a power set for a bad guy or something and like just fly off the seat of my pants. Or I would have a bad guy that I created in my book, and that's all I have is the bad guy. And we're going to see how we get to him, because they always would do something I never thought of. And so I just quit thinking of ways. Now, occasionally they would really get into the weeds and they're like, how do we beat him? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't come up with a way to beat him. I just gave him a stat block.
Yeah, when they give up and they go, you know what? We're going to ask for help. We're going to phone a friend. I'm going to try to find an NPC that knows how to beat him. And like, you never do. He still
Sneak
fails.
attack, bitch.
He still fails with a plus 11. My DM lets him do the sneak attack, providing he yells "sneak attack, bitch" first, because nobody
Pocket
believes
sand.
That's some real Grog is not here. You do not see him. Charisma, intimidation check for stealing energy right there. Because you're going stealth. I love that so much.
Yeah,
I want you to know I'm adding a tier to my next Kickstarter for Hellion and Bash, where I'm going to run games for fans in the Hellion and Bash universe, my superhero universe. And I've had people, I've had people ask for it before, and they're like, "Well, what happens if I fail? Like, are you going to make fun of me in the book?" It's like, no, I'm not going to make fun of you in the book, but it's going to be in there eventually. I'm putting it in here because you're going to fail in awesome ways that I can't think of. So don't feel bad about doing that. That's the raddest thing I've read all day.
there is a whole series I would like to do that takes place in the world of Green Zone that would just be following my kids' team around from Alpha. And, as they're like startup wannabe heroes and they're getting their feet wet and they're getting their butts kicked at times and they're getting their first, like recurring villains. But the ones that they rolled were some of the most fun, exciting stuff that we've ever had in the game. Like one time, all I had was this cybernetic psychic bad guy who's a brain in a giant robot suit, and he turned some of his cult of scientist minions that worshipped him into like brains in jars. And what is up, man? Oh, Ezra, oh, Alex, oh, Lucky 33. What do you know, man? He should be up in here too.
He's probably at work. He has a day job. He's over here putzing, making
Mark
up stuff.
Mark Smirk. He needs to get online and bicker about nonsense. Needs to grow a beard, or at least
Yeah.
tuck his hair around in front. That'll work. That's good enough.
Stop dyeing your hair is what I want to say. Every time I see Alex pop up in my feed and I remember, I'm like, how do you look so good? And I know you're older than me. And he's like, oh, I dye my hair. I'm like, well, what is this shit? I didn't know I could do
It made me
that.
start thinking about it, but then I think about Peacemaker and Dye Beard, and I'm like, nope, 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 nope. I would never keep up with it. Never in a million years.
Oh, he's at work. See, like this is what I'm talking about.
What a
Quit your
poser.
job and never be able to like afford to make books ever again.
What a
That's what I do.
yuppie out there
That's
working for the man, paying his rent, feeding his kids.
That's like whenever like I've seen Lucky 33 grow from like one book to putting out like 10, right? And people look at me, they're like, how come you only put out one book? It's because they still have jobs because they're not idiots. They didn't quit their job and go, I'm gonna make comics. They said, hey, I'm gonna make comics and still pay rent on
I'm gonna do this for fun as a hobby on the side.
It's like it was so smart of them, and I'm so
and
jealous.
still feed my kids. And
because I burned some bridges when I left. Like there's no going back. You know, I walked out like Jerry Maguire, except for I took the goldfish and I took some comics. I was like, who's coming with me? And then they, called security instead.
Yeah, I've left a couple of jobs like that. And then I remember the first time I quit my job to go out on my own to be a freelance graphic artist. And there were a couple of times I was like, I could probably go back to that sign shop and get my job back again. And then the sign shop died and just like into the ground. And I was like, ooh, I jumped off that ship at just the right time. And you had to get used to the waves of being a freelance illustrator. And sometimes, I might make $3,000 for a poster on a corporate gig, for a couple of days work. And then, it might be a month before another job came in. And so like you had to learn to save, and you can't just be like, oh, I got $3,000. Let's go blow it on something.
Yeah, it does make you be like way more careful with like budgeting and like building runways. I was just talking about this on a TikTok I recorded because I get like comments like asking like, well, you say that it's hard to get paid and stuff. What does that mean? I'm like, even if you have consistent work in comic books, the paychecks don't come for a long time. Like,
it's not consistently. It's not every Friday.
No.
It's random.
Because people know that it takes a long time. Like one of the books that I just made, like Hellion and Bash, it's coming out, right? Like, I had that done 2 years ago. But like it takes time to get it out and put it out there. But here's the thing: even once that comes out, I just sold a book to a publisher. It's not going to come out until next year. I wrote it almost 5 years ago. It was illustrated 2 years ago. It's not going to be even on store shelves until next September. And I'm not going to see a paycheck from it until like 2025 once they like get their paychecks and people stop returning them to, from Diamond or whatever. So like, that's what I mean by building your runway. It's not just about finding work. I get work. But the paychecks come when the paychecks come. That's the scary part of it.
And like, I do work for clients in between doing my own books and stuff, and I have a deal. I offer a discount for people that sign up and pay up front mainly because it just lets everything run smoother, and I can burn through the work and get everything done quickly. And I don't have to wait all day for you to get off of work to okay this one page. Yeah, getting sidetracked by commissions, that happens. But like, so I have a discount for people that prepay up front. So sometimes, like when I was doing just other people's jobs all the time, like usually come November, I would have the whole next year already prepaid and booked. And it's all just sitting in PayPal. Like I could say, hooray, I have a whole bunch of money, but I really don't, because if I move it over to my bank account, that money's going to be gone. And then, I don't have money to pay the rent, and I still have a bunch of work that has to get done because they paid for it.
And you got to take other work. You got to rob Peter to pay Paul, and it sends you down a rabbit hole, man.
That drives me nuts. That's the biggest mistake new artists make, is spending the money before the job's done. And then you have to go take other commissions while this guy's work's not done. And now it's 6 months later, and you're asking for new work so that you can pay the bills because you blew his money going out to eat and going to the movies. And and they're still waiting for their job. That will torch your reputation. And indie comics is too small of a world to go burning that many bridges in. And
yeah, we hear about it Like I think
Oh
that that's
yeah.
something like even like say I don't work with every single person in indie comics, right? Like I've never worked on a project with like Braden, right? But I hear about what like the people that Shape Comics has worked with. I hear
Hmm.
about the people that Lucky 33 has had, chances to work with. We all talk to each other, and even if
Yeah.
we don't know every single person through the grapevine, we hear about it. There are people that we say, "Hey, let's not work with this person again," like it
Yeah.
comes up. We've established this network for a reason because sometimes people don't want to follow through on stuff.
And
So
that's
be
the thing
careful.
I always tell people is check references. Like if you're looking for an artist and they won't give you references or contact information about jobs they worked on, there's a reason they don't want to give you that information.
Word.
Like there is a legit reason because they don't want you talking to them and find out how bad it was and how long it took for you to get back to them and stuff. You can talk to everybody I've ever worked with. I will give you a list of everybody,
And
even
we
the
all
one
have
guy
some
I had to give
stuff to
his
say, let me tell you.
even the one dude I had to give his money back. One dude in 49 years I have had to give the money back to and just be like, dude, I clearly I'm not going to be able to make you happy. Here's a full refund. And he still stole the artwork and ruined it
Oh
and
God, of
posted it.
course.
And
But you did a good job, right? And so
I
like
I
that's
did my
super
best.
testament.
He wouldn't be happy with it. I came to find out later in his tirade that he firmly believes once he pays you even $20, he owns you for the rest of your life, and you legally have to make as many revisions as he asks. And he's got some kids from Africa that he's hired in the past where he had them illustrate a book, full color pages, letters, the whole 9 yards, $20 a page, published the book years ago, and is still requiring revisions and completely redoing the pages, basically requiring that they redo an entire book over again for that same $20 that they got paid 3 years ago. And he thinks that's fair.
Yeah,
So,
and like I'll sometimes I'll get asked to do work and I'll see them like clearly you haven't worked enough in the industry to know what standards. So I try to educate and I go, listen, I understand what you're asking for. No one's going to do it for that price, and if they are, you should hire them because I'm not going to do that, right? I'm not going to
mhm,
give you 1,000 versions because here's the thing: to you, it's like, well, I sent you over one story, I sent you 22 pages, but for me, that was 2 weeks worth of work. That's hundreds of hours that I'm putting into your thing that you don't see because you only see the final thing.
mhm.
And the thing that I get back a lot, which cements, I'm like, okay, I won't work with this person again. Is they're like, well, I could have did that. I'm like, well, if you could have done that, you would have done that, and you didn't do it. But those are the people that go on my no list, and I just don't answer those messages anymore.
Sounds a lot like that.
It is
Rhymes.
actually exactly
Yeah.
that is exactly what it is, and I think people sometimes equate that with like exploitation versus working for free. And sometimes like I've taken jobs that I work for free with my friends, with other creators coming up, like peers of mine. Well, I
Oh,
don't
I've
work
worked
for
on some
free,
jobs for like next to nothing just because I love the creator and
right?
I want to work with him and I want to be a part of the project that he's doing. And he's helped me in the past, so I want to help him on this. So, yeah, sure, I'll do it, for some copies of the book or whatever. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I want to help you
But
out.
like a corporation or a person who very clearly has money, the thing that I run into a lot is the people who don't want to pay often say how much money they have. They have so much, but I'm not going to pay you. And I'm like, then why are we on this phone call, man? Like, if you have so much money, like when my friends say they can't pay me, it's like, okay, they can't pay me. That's why we're going to do it for free because we still want to make this book and we're all trying to make it in this industry. But when somebody specifically says, hey, I have all this money and I can pay you, but I won't, I'm like, why would I hang out with you, man?
Mhm.
Like,
What is in it for me to want to be a part of this thing?
right.
Because,
Those are also the
it's
people that think that their book's gonna blow up and sell more copies than
oh yeah.
Spider-Man. They're like, "Oh, I
Like
think I'm gonna get a movie made
I'll
of
give
this."
you 1% of the animated shows. I'll give you a half a percent on the movies. I'm not
Right.
giving you anything on the toys. That's ridiculous. That's a non-starter. But I'll give you, a percentage and a half off of those two things. And you do all this work for free. By the way, I'm going to need at least 20 revisions per page. We may
Right.
have to do this 300 book page book 3 or 4 times to get it right, but we'll get there. You can have it done by the end of the month, right? And
I love the
no,
power of positivity when people say like, "When I make it big," like that's so cool in your head. But I really prefer to work with the people that go, "Listen, this probably isn't gonna go anywhere, but I wanna make it anyway." That those are
I'm
the
like,
people that
man,
I want
if
to
I
do it.
could make it to the middle, I would be so
Exactly.
freaking happy. If I could make it just into the middle of the stream so I could kick my feet up a little bit and go along with the crowd and not be banging up against the shore the whole time and getting holes poked in my little donut while I'm trying to float. That's all I want. I just want to be deep enough in there that I can go along with the current. That's all
Katie's
I'm looking
got a good point. They only have that much money because they won't pay anyone. That's exactly
for.
it. And those are the people that brag about it. And I just, a lot of the people that I work with, I get asked sometimes, like, how do you have so many projects? Like, if you're so broke, how do you do this? And I'm like, I only work with people that I can either afford to pay or the people that want to work with me anyways, even though I can't. And we both agree that we want to work on a project. And if you ever hear about me working on a project where no one's getting paid, there was either a trade involved. So like for instance, me and Fish do that a lot. We're like, I'll write something for him, he'll draw something for me, and that's how we'll do it. And if that doesn't happen, what happened is I said, hey, 50% of whatever this becomes is yours. I
Yeah.
never own 100% of the book if no one got paid, because that's the dumbest thing ever, because it's our thing, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't pay you. Why would I get to keep all of the spoils? That doesn't make any sense.
And that's a hard ask, especially when like nobody knows who you are and you're just starting out, and everybody thinks that they've got the next Star Wars or the next Dune or what have you, the next Game of Thrones. Everybody's book is going to be the next big thing. This is going to be the next Marvel universe. We're gonna put the MCU in the ground. Like you're probably not, because you're never going to beat Disney's money ever.
They
Period.
have so much of it. You don't get it.
Yeah, there's too much of it and too many lawyers. You're not going to beat them. But hey, Esteban, what is up, man?
What's going on, dude?
I tell you, somebody to work with right there. That dude is doing some cool stuff, man. I love his stuff. He hit me up one day with a logo for an idea. We just got to chit chatting, and like an hour later, we've got this whole epic world thought of, and like all these storylines branching out in all these different directions, and and then I realized just how much work I already have on my plate that I've got to do, and I was like, okay, that's going to be a minute
I
because
literally did the same thing with him yesterday. I was like, "Hey, man, like I want to work on something. Let me pitch you some ideas." One idea deep, we're like, "Okay, this is what this is. Here's this whole world." And I'm like, "Okay, I can get a script to you, but it's gonna take a minute because we got some stuff going on." Alex also said, "I'm just happy to be here," and that's how I feel every time I get to work with anybody. Yes, I would love to get paid sometimes, but a lot of it is like you do it for the love, you do it for the passion. We've talked about this before. It's like there's not a lot of money in comics, so I don't necessarily expect people to be able to pay me my full page rate when we go into a project. That's why I tell a lot of people is find people on your level who want to break in and want to make stuff with you, and then you'll be able to
yeah,
afford it
yes.
because you'll work it out. And he is a beast, man.
And that's the thing though, like when you meet somebody that you really get along with and you vibe with, and the biggest thing to me, like as an artist working on somebody else's book, when our imaginations run on the same track and like you have an idea and that inspires me to go deeper, and then you're like, oh well, what if we went from there to here, and I'm like, oh, and then we could go this way, and you're like, yeah, but, oh, and there's a hook right around here, and like that makes it so much more fun than when I'm like, oh, what about this? Like, no, 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 that's not what I wrote. And like, well, what about this? No, 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 that's exciting. We don't do exciting around here. I need mid-level shots. I need a lot of headshots. I need, this is mostly bickering about taxes. Obviously, you don't get what this book is. But when our imaginations run on the same train and we're going on the same path and we like the same things and we inspire each other and we're having fun, that makes me a lot more interested in doing something with somebody rather than just some stranger out of the blue saying, "Oh, I got the next Marvel, I got the next, DCU idea. Like I'm gonna beat everybody, with this idea." I would much rather work on something for fun with Esteban at Ultra Comics or Alex at Lucky
No,
33
you're
or
awesome.
you. Like I would much rather play with these dudes having fun with guys that I like, guys that I respect, guys that I enjoy what they're doing. Um, so much more. Those shared ideas moments is what my writer friend calls galaxy brain moments. I love it when that happens. Oh, that's awesome. Like, like, like Esteban's book, the first book that he did. from Ultra Comics, man, I had so much freaking fun reading that book. Like, and admittedly, I went into it like just to read it to be like, I want to see what the kid did. You know, I bet you there's going to be a couple cool things in
Yeah,
here.
we humor people sometimes, then we open it and you're like, oh shit, no, you're good. Okay,
I
that's my
had
bad.
so much freaking fun. Man, it was like watching Teen Titans mixed with Ben 10, and like I laughed and I'm yelling out sound effects and I'm like, "Oh no!" Like I filmed myself reading the book because I made so many funny reactions while I was doing it. It just it was so cool. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and that's the kind of thing you don't always get in indie comics.
No.
Like I got to read the script for Hellion and Bash before you showed me into the pages, and like it impressed me so much. This is before I ever got to read Tokyo Fire or anything else. It was the first thing I got to read from you.
Yeah, I think
And
I pitched it to you a long time ago. I was like, hey,
yeah,
I don't know you, but will you read my thing? It's kind of
and
sad.
it was so good. I was a little bit mad you were already working on pages with somebody else because I had all these ideas of like how I would want to do it. And then like I got lucky enough to do the lettering for you on that book, and I'm looking through the pages and the artwork is freaking phenomenal. I mean, dude is amazing. He's a great storyteller, and this is his first book. Is that
Yeah,
right?
this is his first big book. Shout out to Marcus Pedro,
Oh
an
man.
artist out of Brazil. Awesome dude. He's mostly done webtoon stuff. There's a webtoon app down there. It's very similar to Tapas or webtoon called
Mhm.
Funktune. You can sign up. You have to be able to read a little bit of Portuguese, but it is worth it. There's some cool stuff coming out of there that you won't see anywhere else.
Oh man.
This is how I spoiled that I know some Portuguese. Humble brag. I worked at a call center for automotive for like 10 years, and it was a Brazilian call desk. But anyways, but like awesome stuff that he's got going on, and he had never done a book in the U.S. And he was like, I don't know, maybe would you want to work together? I'm like, would I want to work together? Hell yeah, man! Like, and
Oh
but
man.
people ask often like how do you have 100 books? How do I, as someone who's new, who hasn't been in it for as long as you, how have I have so many books coming out with working with all these people? And the answer is, number one, be good at what you're doing, but number two, just be nice and excited about people's stuff. You know how I have a book that I've been pitching to Lucky 33 Comics for like a year for, because I'm a nice guy, and when he started telling me stuff, I was like, hey, I'm gonna not be a prick. And if you're not a prick to people, they want to work with you.
Go
That's
figure.
the only secret. And also because sometimes people want to work with you because you're the only guy who yells his name 45 times on TikTok. And they're like, you know who I remember? That guy who says I'm TS and I write comics, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that. But a lot of times it's just like, don't be a jerk, and people are gonna like what you do.
That's the thing. That's the best advice I ever got. Like the first time I ever met a professional comic book artist, and like I ran into somebody that worked at the same gas station as me in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and she was coloring her first gig for Marvel, and she's like, "Oh, hey, I know some people who work for Marvel in DC. You want to meet them?" And she took me over to this little office, and I met Stephen Butler, who was working on Silver Sable at the time, and then he went on to do like Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man for the Clone Saga, and
One of my first comic books ever, just to date myself.
did a lot of stuff over at Archie with like Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff. And like the first thing he told me was like, "Hey, your work's good. Just be the kind of guy people want to work with."
Yep.
And I took that to freaking heart. And in everything that I've done, I've tried to be the kind of guy people want to work with and the kind of guy you want on your team, because like if we're working at the gas station, I'll sweep them up the floors. I'll clean the bathroom, and I will do it good, and I'll put hard work into it. You don't have to do the job you don't want to do. Like I'm the guy you want to team up with at work because I will do that stuff. I'll always do 100%. And it's made all of my working career better. It's made this part of the job so much better. Like I always try and do my best. I always try and be as easy to get along with. I will, like, you give me a script, I will give you the coolest, most awesome version of it I can think of. Sometimes I'll go off the rails a little bit, but it's easier for me to just pencil it out and show you what I'm thinking than to try and explain it in 1,000 words what I was thinking. It's easier. I can pencil it out in 20 minutes and give you a rough sketch of what I'm thinking. And if you like it, we'll go with it. If you don't, I will absolutely 100% put it back the way you wrote it, because like I want you to be happy. But like, if I got a really good idea and I think this would be really cool, I'm going to show it to you and let you decide if you want to do it or not. It ain't going to hurt my feelings. Like, it's your book. But that that kind of thing has made me the person that people want to work with and people keep coming back to hire again. To me, that's the greatest honor, that in the 98 books that I've worked on, I've probably worked with like 5 regular creators in that time, because so many of them just keep coming back book after book after book after book because we get along well, and that's awesome. It's been a lot of fun.
Lucky 33 Comics says just be excited. And that honestly has gotten me more gigs than anything else. Partly for Lucky 33 Comics, partly for Fish. Whenever one of you guys like start telling me lore, I've had you both repeat stuff several times, and you're like, "Yeah," and then this happens. I'm like, "Oh no, no, I remember. I have notes on this. I wrote that down. I wrote down. I have a whole murder board over here with all of my different like postcards of this is when this event happened, so it lines up with here. So if you do give me a chance to write something for you, not only am I going to impress you with knowing all of your lore, I have stuff that fits in between that you're going to appreciate because I care. I'm excited about working in your world. I'm not excited just about writing something or getting paid to do something. I'm excited to be working on your stuff. And that helps me 9 times out of 10 because
Oh,
partly because I can get excited about anything because I'm a nerd and I want to know your lore. Okay, so Virgil did this when he was 9. Okay, I'm going to write that down. That's going to go in there. Who's this character in the background? Does he have a name yet? I have a name if he doesn't have a name. And like that's the stuff that you do because if you're excited, they're excited. You're making something awesome together, and that's how you get good stuff. And those are the notes that I get back when people want to work with me. Is hey, it seems like you really care about this. Like nobody knows my lore. My other teammates don't know all the lore, and that's knowing the lore is so important. It's
nobody
because
else pays that much attention. Yeah, I
exactly,
feel
because
it.
people care and they put the thought into it. And I want you to know that if you're going to let me play with your toys, I'm going to put the care into it as well. You're letting me play with something so important to you. It came out of your brain. It's one of your babies. I want you to know that I give a shit.
Mhm.
And like, how many times have you mentioned like a plot point and I go, actually, Fish, you changed that because when you told me about it before, you had this happen first. And you're like, I don't even remember that, but sure.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and it does change because like it's always bubbling and evolving in my brain too. Like sometimes I will just throw a character in the background in a scene, but by the time the book's published, that character has a whole backstory in my head now, and they have an arc that they're going to go on in the background, that nobody may notice, but like it evolves as it goes. But that's the thing that I really enjoyed working with you on this Kess story, was like I had given you bits of the lore of the world that the mighty cause on and what's going on, and then you took that and just wove in between that and made that tapestry even richer with your ideas and tied different things together and made a story that was really cool and funny and interesting and shows more of what's going on. And then that inspired me to do more things and to bring in more characters and stuff, and make the tribes even more different than just a bunch of humans, and put yetis in there and fishmen and robots and stuff. And
I
um
love doing that, man. My nerd brain does that because I have been reading comic books since I was born, and I have been watching TV shows. I love making them fit. Lucky 33 says it's also so special to see someone take your idea and run with it the way you do. That means so much to me that you care, that it makes your toys feel real because that's what I want to do. I want to see how it fits. So when you tell me that one esoteric bit, I'm going to go, oh, wow, that's going to make this page so much more interesting if you let me play with that idea. Can I add this to it? This all rhymes. Can we make it fit in there?
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that I really liked when we were talking about the story for Alice Lost in Wonderland and taking it from just some shorts that were in the anthology into a full book. And like, because I appreciate your writing, like I wanted to talk it out with you because I like your train of thought. I like the way you think, and I like the way you pay attention to those details. And like your suggestion to tie certain things in together, because it's a knotted up ball of
It's
timey
a
wimey
timey-wimey
nonsense.
thing, yeah,
Like
man.
all these things connect in all these weird ways, and these things cause these things to happen, which caused this to happen in the past. And like your idea of tethering some of these things back and forth to each other and more causality than I had even thought about made it a much more interesting and a much more cohesive piece than my here's a whole bunch of awesome pieces on the board, look how cool they are. Instead it was like, here is this piece. Who happens to be tied to this piece? Is it tied to this piece? We don't know yet. Like it became so much better in the end, and
Well,
I
I
appreciate
appreciate that, and I appreciate that you noticed that I do that. And what does Lucky Three say? It's actually ridiculous how much nonsense I threw at TS, and he literally made it make sense. I appreciate that. I want you to know it wasn't nonsense. You might have said it like nonsense. You might have like threw it at me, or in like 1,000 Discord messages, like we often do. But it's not nonsense, and that's the thing is I never treat it like it's nonsense. It matters because it happened. It might not have happened in our world. It might not have happened to me, but it happened to those characters, and you made them real. And so I give a shit about it. I might not remember what happened in history in the last like 100 years, but I do remember what happened to a little team called the Luminaries in
Mhm.
1960 whatever. Like that's the stuff that I do care about, and I will make room for in my head, and I'm gonna make it make sense, not necessarily because it's important to make it make sense, but because my brain wants it to make sense. It will fit the pieces in, and
Mhm.
that's what I try to bring to my writing. Katie says, I have a friend whose character I love so much that I ask her questions about him that she has never even thought of before, so it makes her develop him more than she would have. That's what I do, is I want to know those questions. I want to have the answers to them. So when I write those characters, they're real, and it's the real character that you had in your head. And again, it makes sense because it did happen. It just didn't happen here. It just didn't happen to us.
Mhm.
That doesn't make it less important. That doesn't make it any less real because your brain, a lot of people don't know this. If you're remembering a thing and it's a story, it remembers it in the same part of your brain as real history. So a thing that happened to you when you're remembering that episode of Spider-Man from 1997 that you really
That's
liked.
why we all remember that Krypton exploded and Uncle Ben died, and,
Exactly.
that's
It
why we
matters
remember
still.
that stuff because we remember it like memories, and it's like Alex was saying the other day from Lucky 33 on TikTok, like, he remembers all this stuff because it's history to him, like, he
It's real to
created it,
him.
he remembers the stories like he was there, just like I remember all the D&D games that I led like we were there. I don't remember sitting around a table rolling dice. I remember being in that sewer when an imaginary poo monster was coming at my kids. It was being projected by a psychic madman, and they failed their savings throw against the psionics. So they think this monster's real. And my son keeps shooting arrow after arrow after explosive arrow, runs out of them because he's just shooting through nonsense down a hallway in the sewers. And then he pulls out an acid arrow, rolls a one. We rolled several different things to see what happened after that one, melted his damn hand off with a roll. Like he broke the acid as he pulled it back and it melted his hand off. So he has to bandage his hand in the sewer and then spends the rest of the game throwing arrows at an imaginary poop monster because he failed his freaking savings throw.
And you can recount every moment of that scene. Yet
Oh,
last week, when I asked you, hey man, what cons do you have coming up? You said, oh, I don't remember. And then when you did finally find the piece of paper that said you had this con coming up, you couldn't tell me if you paid for it yet or not for me to write it down. But yet you remember every single second of that session, and that's what I'm
oh
talking
yeah.
about. Because I try to instill this in as many people who want to write for other people specifically. If you're going to write your own stuff, you're going to care, but you have to give a shit. It's not nonsense that they're telling you, and it can't matter less because it's their idea. The idea is what's important, and it
Hmm.
matters, and it can't be nonsense because then you won't care enough to write your best work. You have to care about their
Yeah,
ideas as much as you care about your ideas. If they're going to let you play with your toys, you got to treat them like you got to hand them back. And you don't want their mom yelling at
absolutely.
you because you scratched up their toys. So you got to care, man.
Yeah. It's exactly the same way as being an artist on a book. Like if if you're just doing a book because somebody's paying you to do a book, it's going to look like you just did a book because somebody paid you to do it.
Right.
And I've bought those books, I've seen those books, I flipped through them and put them in my
Those
giveaway
books
someday
make money
pile.
for big publishers. They exist.
They do. But like when I care about a book and you give me a really cool story and I'm excited about it and I'm putting my all into it, or you really challenged me with something like the book I'm illustrating right now for Greg K. Moquin, Night Watch, he pushed me out of my comfort zone to do stuff I never would have done before, like MMA fighters and stadiums full of people and fighting in a construction zone where everything's freaking girders and 3-point perspective. That's a lot of fun. Uh,
That's why
Like,
you have that crowd brush that you can get if you go and subscribe to the School of Fish
oh,
Patreon.
trust me, next month there's probably going to be brushes about how to make girders and stuff because I've learned a lot over the last month. Um, Goodness gracious, I've made so many assets this
But
month.
you cared enough to go and learn that skill to make it look amazing to the point where like
Studying MMA fighting because
yes.
like superhero fighting is so different because it's so over exaggerated and extreme. MMA fighting isn't like that. Like you can't reach all the way back for a punch in MMA fighting. You're gonna get killed before you ever get that punch off.
Yeah,
Like,
Spider-Man's the only person who can bend down to the ground and punch somebody without
mhm.
getting kicked in the head.
Yeah, I had to learn how to make it look like MMA fighting, but still be exciting. And then that colored the way he fights later on. And he's not just like wild superhero fighting. My friend laughed at me for remembering a detail about a character he wrote from 10 years ago when I can barely remember what happened this morning.
But it's so real
Yeah,
because here's the thing though, Katie. It's because you cared. You don't care what you did this
I
morning
am
because it was
indeed.
boring. You cared about what happened in that game, man. Like
Hmm.
that's the part is because you give a shit,
Yeah.
about it. And that's the trick. If you want to remember all the details of your friend's comic book and you want to write stuff for them, remember those things. Tell yourself that they're important because they are. And if they're important to them and they're important to you, you're going to make something cool and people are going to resonate with it. The best compliments I got for Tokyo Fire is people going, "This world feels like it matters. It feels fleshed out. It feels like you made a real thing." And it's because I did. And
Hmm.
me and the co-creator Sky Hawkins, we gave a shit about it, and she cared about my ideas, and I cared about hers. And so, what you're seeing in that page, why it feels lifelike, is because we cared and we made something special because we saw through to that world. You can do that with anything. You just have to tell yourself that it matters.
I'm always getting comments from people like, "Man, you went nuts on that page. Like, I never would have put that
But
big
that
a
much
crowd
effort.
in the background or something." And I'm like, "Well, it's a giant catastrophe and the news crews are there. Like, there's going to be a crowd of people standing behind that police line watching with their phones in the air. And if that crowd is crowded around the news reporter, then when you turn the camera to look at Five Star floating in the air and you see the news reporter, there's going to be cameras being held up in the air trying to film it. And if the cameras are up there, then Five Star is going to be on the screen of that camera. And, but it matters. It matters to me when that camera turns that the guy with the orange afro is on the same side of the reporter as he was on the when the camera was flipped the other way. Those things matter, that the same people are in the scene, that you can tell that the cameraman is the same guy from panel to panel. And and I'm always doing stuff like that, putting in perspective shots when you need it, or putting in crowds or things like that, eh, because it makes it real. It makes it feel grounded. It it always bugs me when it's like, oh, we're in, downtown New York and it's two guys standing against a wall. And I'm like,
Yeah, you know that spot in New
really?
York where there's just two
Where
dudes?
there's
Like
nobody else. There's no
no traffic.
graffiti, no urine on the ground, no gum. It's just two guys standing against the wall with a couple little hashtag tick marks on the side.
Oh
That
man.
one clean wall in New York, that gray one. The one. The one nobody walks by. There's no shadow of the crowd going by or anything. Like occasionally I'll do a silhouette if I really need the main character to stand out or something.
Sure, sure.
But then there's also ways, like I just said, like you could do one panel that shows the crowd, then you could have them standing against the wall and just do an outline of the shadow of the crowd, against the wall, to let us know that they're still packed in around a lot of people without having to draw them. Like a lot of times I'll put a lot of effort into one panel to really go ham on the way the background looks and show you where they are. And then the rest of the time, maybe I can get away with just putting a cabinet behind him. So, oh yeah, he's still in the kitchen. And, there's lots of ways to do it. But again, it has to matter to you. And,
Yeah, I
but
think the thing that people see when they see this stuff is they have this idea that if you're working like a corporate job, that's a real job. That's an important job. So when we do the art stuff, it's just nonsense. It's just silly. It's silly fun time. And it is silly fun time for sure, but we also take it seriously. One of the first gigs I ever got, it ended up falling through but I had got picked up by a publisher, and I had a pretty big artist work on it because I had pitched him this book randomly, and I've gotten lots of no's from like indie people. And one of the first yeses I got was from this professional artist. He had just did a book with Marvel, and the whole reason why he agreed to do the project with me is because I cared. Because he asked me one question. He was like, "Well, I don't know about this. Why would that happen?" And I sent him what can only be described as a manifesto, basically. I sent him my Bible for the book, and I'm like, "Well, actually, it's because of this." And I sent him this 500-page document for all the lore in the world and everything. So I was like, "If you have any other questions, we can change some of this, but I have thought through a lot of this stuff." And he was like, "I want to work with you." And that's how I approach every project, whether it's out of my brain or out of yours, because if you care and you treat it seriously, it's going to come through in the work. And I just love it. Josh is the king of the
That's one thing that I want to do a deep dive video about, because like I've been working a lot, like in this book that I'm working on now for Greg. A lot of scenes take place in his apartment, and like he gave me like a floor layout for the place that I can use to move around
Hell
and make
yeah.
sure everything is in the right places. And I sat down and designed all the cabinets and the refrigerator and everything out as detailed assets. So when I put everything in perspective and now I know where everything needs to be, I can draw in some outlines, and then I can drop these images in, bend them into perspective. Sometimes I'm just using them as a pencil layer to redraw everything,
Sure.
but it
But
lets me
still, it
know
helps you
how
go.
many cabinet doors, how many drawers are there, stuff like that. And it helps keep it consistent. I did a real detailed drawing of the windows, and so I can turn that into perspective and then draw over it and make it look really cool. And it it looks so nice. And it's one of the nice things about working digitally, because if I was working traditionally, that would have taken a lot longer, or it would have looked a lot simpler.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have
It's
had so
really
much
hard to.
complicated brickwork.
Well, you still would have had to. You would have had some digital stuff involved because you would have had to look up that architecture and print it out and or bring it up and still use the reference, and it just wouldn't have gone as fast. And
Mhm.
that's why to bring it all the way back full circle to what we started talking about. Don't be afraid to use digital tools. It's okay.
Yeah. And also, as we were talking earlier, that's part of why I love indie comics so much, because the people in indie comics care. And because you've usually got a much more limited run compared to the big guys, like you might have 12 or 13 issues of Hot Shot, or 100 something issues of Invincible, or 4 issues of Green Zone, or whatever. And like you can read it all, you can understand it all. There's not going to be a big retcon in issue 4 of the Mighty Caw that undoes everything that you've read up into this point, because I care about this world. The things that are happening in it happen for a reason. The things that he says in issue 1 and 2 that don't seem like they apply to anything are going to make a whole lot of sense, down the road. And I want it to be one of those things that you can go back and be like, "Oh, that's what that was." Like I love going back and watching old episodes of Doctor Who, and he keeps throwing out the Shadow Proclamation, and it didn't really mean anything in the beginning, but then later on, he's like, "Oh,
Until
I
they
know what that
eventually,
is
until
now."
one of the writers goes, "Hey, can I do the Shadow Proclamation?" And they
Yeah,
go, "Yeah."
exactly.
And because they
And
care. That's one of the magics of like it's such a timey-wimey show and they do retcon things and stuff, but everybody who writes on that show, you can tell loves Doctor Who, all the different forms of it, and that's one of the
mhm.
magic, parts of it. And one of the things I put in my Kickstarter for Hellion and Bash was I was like, listen, this is a love letter. This is an ode to the stories that I love, which are stories that care about continuity, which have stakes. When people die, people stay dead. There's no retcons. There's no world resets. Damn, I just remembered I need to finish that copic.
Yeah, you need to hurry up so we can get that in issue 1. Yes, you need to do that. Okay. You need to hurry up so we can get it in the trade like next year, is what you need to do.
Speaking of trades, as we wrap this up, we should probably plug Fishtails once again.
Oh man, we absolutely should. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick, because we need to check it out.
I need to check to see if my review has been approved for Hellion and Bash #1 as well. I've been sitting here waiting 2 days. I don't know what they need to approve. I don't have anything to give people but a book.
Yeah, that's It's weird sometimes, like, and sometimes there's so little on my Kickstarter. I don't do a whole lot of crazy extra stuff, so um, there wouldn't think there's that much to prove. Let me turn the screen
The
on.
only thing I could offer was more stuff of me. I was like, "Hey, do you want a cameo in the book? Do you want to play D&D with me? Do you want to talk about my book?" Like, I don't have anything else to offer but my time.
The
Uh,
D&D game is a really awesome idea, and I never thought about offering that, but like I've been running a game that takes place in the world of Green Zone for so long. Like
right.
it would be so much fun to jump in on. That would be a fun thing to do.
That's one of the few things like I have. I think like a spot costs $50, and I'm like, that's a lot of money, but it's the only way I could justify it time wise. But I really hope somebody grabs a spot because I want to run more D&D games. So it's like
Hmm.
this is just an excuse for me to play more D&D, and I can tie it into work so I can make it count. You know.
Absolutely. We've got the story The Crucible in here that is written by the effervescent, ever lovely T.S. Luther. And it takes place in the world of Ka, back before he lands, back before Kess is the mightiest warrior of the clan Black Bear. It takes place as she's a teenager going through this crucible with the other young warriors wannabes from all the different clans, and they have to prove their mettle in all these different trials and stuff. It's really cool. It really dives into the prophecy and everything about this mighty warrior that's going to overthrow the kingdom of Za. And it really helps flesh out the world that Cause just landed on, which is one of the fun things about doing an anthology like this, because like it would be a long time before the mighty Cog gets to a place to do a flashback like this, but I can put it in Fishtails and it doesn't have to be related to exactly what's going on in the book right now. I can tell the other stories that are going on and have fun with that stuff and flesh out some of these characters there. And Kess is one of my favorite characters ever. Like her and Alice are my two favorite characters now. And Kess is absolutely based on my daughters, like an amalgamation of all of my girls. And they're all beautiful and they're all a little dangerous. I wouldn't mess with a single one of them. And they're all determined badasses that will get things done. And, I I'm so proud of each and every one of them. And she is absolutely the epitome of them. And then we have the B team, which is a story I'm super proud of that I co-wrote with my son Barely, and he illustrated, and he nailed it on this. Like we worked out some bullet points, and then he did the script. He did everything, the pencils, inks, letters, everything. We did a little bit of editing on it just to make sure everything fit well into the universe and all of that. We even added a name for the bad guy here, like a human name for him besides his superhero supervillain name that may or may not be a nod to our buddy Alex. And it's it's really a story about what happens when like your big superhero is off planet and can't be there when one of his bad guys attacks and like takes over a bank and is going to start killing victims if you don't. He's going to kill hostages if Captain Atomic doesn't show up, but Captain Atomic's across the galaxy. What are you going to do? You send in the B team, and you've got this group of oddball characters that work for Alpha that do their best to impersonate the big guys when they're gone. And one of them is a shape shifting alien you can see in the bottom who's really good at impersonations. He's got the look, he's got the sound. I mean, he's got everything. He doesn't have the powers, but like he really looks like Captain Atomic and pulls it off well. But also, he doesn't study. He doesn't read the dossiers. He doesn't really know what's happening when he goes in. He's flying by the seat of his pants the way I would be doing, and going into a podcast without a promo ready to go. And he nearly gets himself killed in the process because he doesn't realize that Max Voltage is an electric based supervillain and nearly fries him. Super cool story. I'm so proud of him. He did an awesome job. It's clever, it's funny, it's emotional. We've also got Eddie from Green Zone being introduced as the new host in the book, which was a funny idea from my buddy J Man, and I absolutely loved it. He was like, you need like a crypt keeper type character, somebody to like introduce the stories and you know do the in between bits and stuff. And I was trying to think of what to do, and then I was like, oh man, Eddie would be the perfect pun on Fish Tales, Fish Man telling these stories. And He's kind of a stick in the mud, and he's, really a fish out of water, da-dum-bum, psh, and doesn't fit into any of these places, doesn't take it well, and it's just been so much fun to play with him in that situation, make him uncomfortable in all these places, break the fourth wall, make funny jokes. We've got the creative team here of me and Hannah Shane Quee, my amazing flatter, and then we got this sexy beast here, writer of all kinds of awesome books like Tokyo Fire and Growing Up and Hellion and Bash and many other things on their way. We've got my young clone who's soon to surpass the master, Bear Lee. Kind of makes me a little bit mad. He's so good so fast. We got your digital books. We got your digital catch up tier. We got the physical and digital copies. We've got the physical catch ups. We've got, and this was a really neat idea that TS had that I really appreciated, was having a catch up tier for the Mighty Cause. So, like, everything that's going on in this world and who Kess is when you read the story of the Mighty Kess or the Warrior Kess. Sorry, I didn't mean to
How dare you?
misname her there. And there's also a physical tier, and then having one for Green Zone. So, like, if you want to know about this world that this B team story is happening in, the story works fine on its own. But if you want to know everything, then you can check this out and get it. You can even get the source book, which will give you more information about my buddy Eddie, or you can get the whole library if you want it. And all of the libraries available is digital and physical books. There's T-shirts, there are wristbands, there's a mini comic collection. Uh, there's also the cool Alpines that we just got in that we talked about earlier that I'm super proud of. They're available on there. There's a commission tier on here for either one character or a variant cover with like up to 5 characters. Like, this is what Joe Solis gets all the time that I was doing the podcast with the other night, doing his new variant cover. And then, like TS mentioned earlier, you can get some of the original line art from the Crucible story and then some of the other variant covers that I've done over time. The Barbarian homage one, I'm actually going to really hate to part with that if somebody buys it, but I really kind of want to mount that up on my wall myself because I'm really proud of that when it came out cool. And it was fun to do that live on the art stream. But it's available. GoMrFish.com will take you right there. Or you can go to Kickstarter and type in Fishtails, Tales, like, stories, not hind ends. And always got to make it difficult. But yeah, Fishtails Volume 2 is available now. Go check it out on Kickstarter, and hope to see y'all there. We've surpassed the halfway point. We've got 8 days left to go. It's going to be exciting. The printers are already asking me, like, when are the files going to be ready? I'm like, man, the book's ready to go. I just need the money to pay you to make it happen. Oh man. All right. So before we get off of here, TS, where can people find you online and follow you, check out your work?
And well, you can see me do dances and talking about comic books and all sorts of stuff over on TikTok at TS Luther. And if you want to check out all of my books, you can head over to can'tbekilledcreations.com/comics. You can find all the stuff over there. My new stuff, Hellion and Bash, that's coming out soon. If you want to catch up on old stuff like Tokyo Fire, Growing Up, you can find it all over there. But yeah, it's going to launch on Kickstarter soon. As soon as they review it and they say yes, you're going to be able to go and check it out over on Kickstarter. So please do that if you're interested in any of the fun things that I've said. But before I go, I did want to say sorry, Fish. I heard about your wife. I heard she got a hit from the mob. What happened with that?
Got hit from the mob?
Yeah, because she sleeps with the fish.
Oh, oh, oh my God. That's horrible. Oh, that's beautiful. That is the worst dad joke. On that note, we're going to go because I can't compete with that. Have a nice day, everybody. We will see you again. We will be back again with Bickerin Beards next month, and there's going to be lots of cool stuff coming every week on the Patreon, so check it out, and we will see you guys later. Oh, my God, that stunk so bad.